Have you ever seen a JRPG get low reviews or everyone says it's bad, but when you play it for yourself, it's actually pretty fun? Well, that's exactly the kind of game we'll be talking about in today's video. I'll be sharing 10 quote-unquote bad JRPGs that are actually fun and worth checking out. Now, the first one we have is Lightning Returns Final Fantasy XIII. I know, this sounds crazy, but just hang with me. This is the final chapter of Lightning's trilogy, and it drops you into a dying world with a literal 13-day countdown to the apocalypse. Lightning has been appointed as the chosen savior, tasked with collecting as many souls as possible before time runs out. The story is genuinely convoluted if you haven't played the other two games in the series, but for veterans of the series, this is the conclusive send-off to the trilogy, with each returning character getting a proper arc to close it out. Sometimes in odd or unexpected roles. The combat system here is the real reason you're going to want to play this game. You'll cycle between 3 fully customizable garb loadouts mid-battle, each with different abilities mapped to different face buttons. It turns every fight into a real-time puzzle of cooldown management and pattern reading that no other Final Fantasy game has replicated before or since. This has kind of been the blueprint that modern Final Fantasy games were built on, emphasizing the stagger system. Genuinely, it's really fun and definitely the best part of the game. I will say, however, that the time limit is a bit divisive and the side quests are pretty fetch heavy, but the combat alone makes it worth playing, especially if you bounce off at launch. Not to mention some pretty embarrassing production values for a mainline Final Fantasy game, some low resolution textures and low detailed characters and environments, but there are some nice CG cutscenes. If you're willing to play it just for the combat, I think it's worth it for that alone. The Diofield Chronicle is one of my favorite all-time underrated gems. In the game, you lead the Blue Foxes, a mercenary group caught in a political war over a resource-rich island nation. And the Game of Thrones comparison is not subtle. The composers who scored that show are literally on the soundtrack. And the story is dense and takes a few hours to really open up, but the slow-burn political intrigue pays off for players willing to engage with its lore. To me, Waltequin is the star of the show. She comes off as a helpless princess type when she first gets introduced in the story, but then transforms into this agent of chaos who I absolutely loved. And she also got her own free story DLC that's worth a play as well. Not to mention the game has a pretty wild, unexpected ending that you won't see coming. The real-time tactical battle system is what makes Diofield stand out. Rather than the traditional grid-based turn-based structure you'd expect from something like Final Fantasy Tactics or Fire Emblem, you're directing 4 units live on the field, pausing to issue commands, hold choke points, and land backstab bonuses. The missions are compact and replayable, and I think that's where the real hook of this game comes in. They're never more than a couple minutes, and it becomes really addictive to want to replay them all, do all the different side missions so you can upgrade your characters and just do everything the game has to offer. I ended up getting the Platinum Trophy in this game because it was just that fun. Now, I will say the visual style is a little bit odd, if not really unique, making liberal use of lens flares, but I kind of dug it and I kind of got used to it by the time the game was over. And while the game can feel kind of repetitive and a little easy, I feel like it's more about building really broken character builds and how efficient you can make battles rather than testing your wit or strategy prowess. And this is a game you can probably grab on a discount for under $20 if you're patient, and I think it's definitely worth a playthrough at that price. If you like the Persona games, you definitely gotta try Eternites. Here in this game, you and your best friend are creating dating app profiles when the apocalypse starts. That setup alone really hooked me and sets it apart from the Persona games. Not to mention, it mostly takes place on a train in Seoul, South Korea rather than Japan. The rest of the story follows a small group of survivors navigating the end of the world with 4 potential love interests, each giving a fully developed arc. Yuna, I'm sure, is the canon route and the one I went with in my first playthrough, but the endings change depending on who you choose, so it's definitely worth playing the game again and again. Min was another character I really fell in love with during my time playing. Not to mention surprisingly great voice performances as well. Considering this is a one-man indie team, the voice cast really did a fantastic job. The bond system directly ties relationship progress into combat. Building your connection with a character makes you stronger in battle, which gives social sim elements real mechanical stakes rather than just flavor. The combat itself is an action hack and slash built around perfect dodges that slow down time on success, and the different characters can do elemental attacks or heal you mid-combat, but you can't control them directly. I will say I thought the combat was pretty fun, but it can be a little frustrating at times, especially when you need to break through shields of the tougher enemies, and to do that you need to do perfect dodges and then complete a QTE sequence. Visually, the game is pretty distinct with its purple and pink color motif, although it can be really dark at times to see where you're going, especially when you have this bright glowing arm. Overall though, it's a really cool tight package you can finish in under 10 hours, but also begs to be replayed with wildly different endings depending on who you decide to romance. Star Ocean: The Divine Force is not the most polished or best game ever, but there's a lot of fun to be had here. In the game, space merchant Raymond Lawrence crash lands on a medieval planet and teams up with the warrior princess Letitia, and what starts as a local political crisis escalates into a galaxy-spanning conspiracy. The dual protagonist choice at the start means each playthrough gives you different context for the same events, and the cast is the strongest the series has had in years. The drone character Duma in particular has one of the most quietly satisfying character arcs in the entire franchise. Duma also functions as a jetpack for exploration, where you can fly between rooftops and different cliffs to find hidden areas, making each new location feel worth exploring. I absolutely loved exploring every corner of each new town I came to, and Duma made that so much more fun. The combat itself is fast-paced real-time action with customizable character combos and blindside attacks using Duma to keep battles kinetic and distinctive. And there are a lot of different playable characters with wildly different movesets, everything from sword users, gun users, casters, and you even have characters that can only heal and don't even have attack moves. I will say the open areas did feel a little emptier than they should, and the side quests are a little generic, but traversal, combat, and Motoi Sakuraba's excellent soundtrack make a strong enough case on their own. This is definitely the return to form the series needed. Now, I know the HD 2D remake of Star Ocean 2 was a huge hit, but I'm hoping Tri-Ace gets at least one more crack at the mainline series because I feel like they're on to something here. Fairy Tail was one of the most shockingly addictive games I've ever played, and one I did not expect to get the Platinum Trophy for. It's based on the manga and anime series of the same name. Here, the guild returns from a 7-year disappearance to find their reputation destroyed and funds at zero. Rebuilding Fairy Tail from the ground up is the through line of the game and gives every mission genuine narrative purpose. The game is for fans of the series, and it's upfront about that. The story skips too much connective tissue for newcomers to follow, but the character writing and banter across 16 playable guild members is handled better than most anime adaptations ever attempt. I will mention there is some weird production value snafus, like there's characters that talk but they don't have in-game character models. The game definitely shows its budget at times, but it's good where it counts, and that's with its addictive gameplay. The game has turn-based combat and uses a 3x3 enemy grid with abilities that cover different tile patterns, a small tactical layer that keeps fights more active than a standard turn-based combat system. The fairy gauge fills as you deal damage and unlocks magic chain, a party-wide combo sequence building into extreme magic finishers. It's exactly as satisfying as it sounds if you know these different characters. And because it's all about running a guild, there's a lot of fetch quests from a jobs board. Again, I found these surprisingly addictive, but you may not, so your mileage is definitely going to vary with this game depending on your tolerance for that stuff. The visuals here are modest. The game is built by Gus, the same team that makes the Atelier games, so they're not going to blow you away, but they do the characters justice and it looks pretty solid. Overall, the music and the voice acting is what you'd expect, as they use the same voice cast from the anime. And I'll say, I think this game is going to vary wildly amongst players that watch this video more than any game on the list, but genuinely, I had a blast with it, and I think you might as well. Now, moving on from one Gus game to another, let's talk about Atelier Rona DX. Now, the older Atelier titles were much simpler, but there was a certain charm to them that I just really enjoyed, and Atelier Rona is where I fell in love with the series. Here, there's no world to save, no ancient evil. Rona is just a young alchemist apprentice who has to prove her workshop's worth to the kingdom by completing 12 government-assigned tasks over 3 in-game years, or she has to shut it down. Critics that expected a traditional JRPG story rated it accordingly, but what they missed is that this slice of life character writing is genuinely warm and funny, and the supporting cast has more personality than most games give their leads. Rona in particular is super cute and a little clumsy, but hard not to fall in love with and root for. The alchemy system is the draw. Every item you need for combat must be synthesized from gathering materials, with quality and traits that vary based on your ingredient combinations. Time management is the core tension. Every action costs in-game days, whether you're picking something up or moving between locations, and you have to hit quarterly deadlines while leaving room for gathering and crafting. If efficiency puzzling appeals to you, this loop is deeply addictive, but I know most people didn't like this time restraint, so again, your mileage is definitely going to vary here, but I personally never felt like it was that big of a problem. And that cel-shaded art style really holds up beautifully, especially in this pseudo-remake DX version, and Gus' soundtrack is warm and fitting throughout, just really charming, light, and happy music. But know what you're getting here. It's a charming life sim JRPG, not some epic adventure. Now, while Sword and Fairy Together Forever is technically a Chinese RPG, not a JRPG, it's one of my most viewed reviews on my channel, and I figured people watching this video would want to check out this game as well. Now, Sword and Fairy is one of China's most beloved RPG franchises, and almost nobody noticed this game particularly. The story follows Jing Shu, a young warrior pulled into conflict between humans, demons, and deities rooted in Chinese mythology and Whihc tradition. The expected setup of divine good, demonic evil gets deliberately flipped, and the actual antagonist reveal is genuinely effective. One thing to keep in mind with this game is that it's only available with Chinese voiceover, and sometimes the game moves the subtitles a little too fast, even for fast readers, so it can be challenging at times to keep up with. And at launch, there were definitely quite a few bugs that prevented the game from really immersing you in its story, but from what I understand, these have mostly been patched post-launch. Thankfully, the game holds up where it really counts, and that's with its gameplay and visuals. This is a real-time action RPG with 4 characters you can swap between on the fly. You'll have 2 melee characters, 1 magic user, and 1 debuffer that has sort of a bow. The game is just genuinely really fun. And beyond combat, the game throws impressive variety at you. There's this moment where you're sort of like sliding down an icy mountain, there's stealth segments, a pretty fun, addictive card game, and this sort of like dancing mini game, as well as some platforming challenges. The game is also visually stunning. Environments routinely look like concept art, and the music leans into its cultural roots with traditional instrumentation against orchestral swells. This is another game that's been out for a while, and you could probably pick up on the cheap, genuinely worth a playthrough if it looks interesting. Again, not exactly a JRPG, but a game I think JRPG fans would really dig is Dust Diver. The game is set in a lovingly recreated Jimending, a real shopping district in Taipei. Dust Diver follows a high school student, Yang Yumo, who absorbs the powers of a guardian spirit named Leo, now trapped as a tiny stone lion. The story is light coming-of-age material that never oversells its own stakes, and the supporting cast, especially the convenience store crew that serves as your base, give the game most of its personality through the interactions between missions. The game has a sort of Dynasty Warrior style combat where you're fighting big groups of enemies and building SP to unleash Guardian powered specials. Each Guardian you unlock brings a different attack style, and covering their full movesets is how the combat actually develops over time. The loop between the different combat missions and freely exploring Jimending, including eating at food stalls, side missions that build character relationships, breaks up the action effectively. It's kind of a mini Persona-like in a way, just minus the dating sim aspects. And the cel-shaded art style is bright and confident, with a soundtrack that smartly flips between relaxed city music and hard rock battle tracks depending on which world you're in. Now, the game has a modest runtime at only around 10 or so hours depending on how much of the side content you want to engage with, but I feel like it's definitely worth a playthrough, but absolutely skip its bloated, grindy sequel. Imagine if there was an Ys game on the PlayStation 1, and that's basically Dragon Valor in a nutshell. In the game, you play as a boy named Clovis, who watches a dragon kill his sister, inherits a legendary sword, and sets off for revenge. But Clovis doesn't finish the story himself. The game is structured in chapters across multiple generations of the same bloodline, with your choices including who Clovis starts a family with, determining who the next hero is. A multi-generational dragon hunting dynasty across 5 chapters is a pretty cool and unique concept for a story. And as I mentioned before, the game has hack and slash action combat. You'll be hacking through enemies, using magic scrolls, and handling light platforming elements with a moveset that holds up better than you might expect. And the boss battles are a pretty nice highlight, well-designed set pieces with readable patterns that actually require you being engaged with the combat. And what's nice is the game is relatively short, around 6 hours, which may or may not be a good thing depending on what you're looking for, but the branching story paths add replay value for anyone who wants to see everything the game has to offer with its story. I would say the main problem here is that the game is not readily available on any modern platform, so you'll have to get yourself a physical copy for the PS1 or use emulation if you want to play it. But genuinely, I think it's worth picking up if you like the Ys games or just old school action RPGs. And now we're saving the most egregious case for last, and that's Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Explorers of Sky. It has a 54 on Metacritic, a 4.9 from IGN, and critics called it dated, lazy, and a ripoff. Sitting next to that is a 9.1 user score, one of the largest gaps between critical and audience reception in the entire history of the medium. Now in this game, you wake up as a human transformed into a Pokemon with no memory of who you are. You partner with a second Pokemon to form an exploration team, and what begins as a small dungeon crawling adventure slowly reveals itself as a story about time, sacrifice, and identity, with plot twists that hit harder than anything else in the broader Pokemon franchise. Genuinely, no joke here, this might be the best story in any Pokemon game. And as the name implies, it's a mystery dungeon game. It's sort of a roguelike dungeon crawling RPG with procedurally generated floors, limited inventory, and a mission board system that builds your exploration rank through hundreds of different jobs. And the game has a pretty significant amount of post-game content as well. The Sky exclusive extra chapters expand on supporting characters in ways that make this the definitive version of an already awesome game. Now, the visuals are basically a GBA game on DS, but I personally love great pixel art, so this never really bothered me. The game also has a pretty incredible soundtrack that you don't want to miss out on. This is the game critics got the most wrong on this entire list, and you should definitely go play it. Now, these were some quote-unquote bad JRPGs that are actually worth playing, but if you want to hear about some 100+ hour JRPGs that are actually worth your time, watch this video next.